Shalom. This sermon is called Why Teach the Graphic Novel Mouse, and it was delivered on Shabbat, February 5th, 5782, Parashat Terumah. I have had a scale in my bathroom for a long time. Gradually, its accuracy decreased. We used it, for example, to weigh our suitcase before our recent trip, and in spite of its assurance that we were within the weight limit, when we got to the airport, we found that we were not. So this week I bought a new bathroom scale, one that is presumably more accurate. The first time I used it, I realized that actually I prefer my old one. It turns out that I like being 5 pounds lighter. Last week, the McMinn County School Board in Tennessee voted to remove the graphic novel Mouse from its 8th grade curriculum. It seems that they want their Holocaust education to be lighter. Mouse is a graphic novel that tells the story of the Holocaust from the perspective of Vladik, the father of Art Spiegelman, who is the author and illustrator of the book. I have to confess that the idea of a graphic novel about the Holocaust didn't really resonate with me, and I didn't read the book until this whole episode happened. But it turns out that graphic novel is an excellent medium to talk about the Holocaust. It shows in pictures, in drawings, and in words, and it gives an impact that might not come if we're just reading words. The book was published in the 90s, first serially, and then in 2 volumes. Now you can buy it also in 1 volume. Art Spiegelman drew the pictures, so the Jews are depicted as mice, the Nazis are cats, and the Poles are pigs. And when Jews pretend to be Poles, which does sometimes happen, they put on a pig snout, and you can see the straps that hold the mask in place, like the masks that we wear today. This is the story of Vladik before the war, during the Holocaust, and then afterwards. It deals in great detail with the relationship of the father and son, all the difficulties with that. Art is not reticent to talk about his own struggles with trauma, particularly with his mother's suicide that happened when he was 20. The book, it's a graphic book. It's often taught to middle school students. Our parsha for this week is Terumah. The first half of the book of Exodus was about the exodus of the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt. The second half of the book of Exodus is about some of the ways the people dealt with the ongoing trauma of their time in Egypt. Mouse is about the ongoing trauma of Vladik, the survivor, of his first wife, Anya, who was also a survivor and who killed herself, of his second wife, Mala, also a survivor, both of the Holocaust and of her marriage to Vladik, of his son, Art, the author, with his own inherited trauma. On January 10th, the McMinn County School Board voted unanimously to remove Mouse from the 8th grade curriculum in spite of the strong protests from the educators present. Mouse was the cornerstone of the Holocaust unit. This means that Holocaust will not be taught to 8th graders in McMinn County this year. Mouse also was an anchor in the full curriculum, meaning that the removal of Mouse jeopardizes later units as well. Why did they remove Mouse from the curriculum? The school board claimed that they were removing the book because, quote, there is some rough, objectionable language in the book, some cuss words, words that if the students used in the hallways, they would be suspended. It is true that there are some mild cuss words in the book, words that were used to bring attention to the atrocity. I am not a person who objects to the occasional appropriately placed cuss word, but if the school board were so concerned, they could have blacked out those 8 words. They also claimed that there was nudity in the book. Nudity. We are talking about drawings of mice. To consider Photos of hanged naked Jews to be sexual in nature would be warped. To call a drawing of a mouse dead of suicide in a bathtub nudity is just laughable, except that it's not funny. McMinn County School Board member Tony Allman said at the meeting, "We don't need to enable or somewhat promote this stuff. It shows people hanging. It shows them killing kids. Why does the educational system promote this kind of stuff? It's not wise or healthy." Of course, it's not wise or healthy to hang people or to kill kids. I cannot believe I actually had to say that. But people were hanged and kids were murdered. It happened. Educating students about the horror that happened throughout history is not promoting this stuff. These explanations clearly do not make sense. We have to ask, what was the real reason that the school board voted to remove Maus from the curriculum? On this, many theories abound, none of them pretty. Maybe it is as simple as that the school board did not want to expose their 8th graders to the actual horrors of the Holocaust. They deny this theory. There is no Gentile rescuer in Maus. Maybe the school board was troubled by giving students a book that did not include a positive Gentile that they could relate to, someone that they could say, "I would have been like them." Maybe the problem is that the protagonist in Maus did not die. Maus is not about a dead Jew. Maus is about a survivor. Perhaps the school board would have preferred a book with a dead Jew that the students could sympathize with. Maybe the problem is the survivor himself, who was not an overly sympathetic person. We see the trauma that Vladik endured, and we also see what a jerk he is. Vladik does not fit our model of how a survivor should behave. He is not a nice guy. He is a bully. He is emotionally abusive. He is manipulative. Maus is not only about Vladik the survivor. It is also about his son, the trauma his son inherited, the difficult relationship between the father and the son. Maybe the school board wanted students to think that all parents and children get along beautifully. Maybe it was the suicide of the mother that frightened them. Maus confronts trauma. It does not have a neat ending that comes in a pretty box with a bow. Maybe this too troubled the school board. All of these theories assume that the members of the school board actually read Maus before banning it, something that I'm not at all sure we should assume. The theories I have listed, of course, are the very reasons that Maus should be taught to 8th graders in this country. I don't have time here to tell you about the many articles I read by children of survivors who found themselves in Maus, by students who were profoundly impacted by Maus, by people who had their eyes open in a variety of ways. Talk to me after Shabbat, and I can share some of them. Or after you see this video. This book packs a wallop. The ethicist Dr. Rebecca J. Epstein-Levy says, Maus is a work that powerfully demonstrates how acknowledging moral complexity absolutely does not preclude moral clarity. That was hard. I will say it again. Maus is a work that powerfully demonstrates how acknowledging moral complexity absolutely does not preclude moral clarity. She goes on to say, I suspect that to this school board, a palatable Shoah book might well have portrayed the Shoah as indeed as horrible as it was. But it would have made Vladik a plaster saint, and it probably would have ended with his liberation. But instead, in Maus, Vladik is a complete jerk. He's a jerk before, during, and after his ordeal. And what was done to him and everyone else is still an atrocity. Actually, Epstein-Levy did not say jerk. The word she used was not appropriate for the Bima. Maus is an excellent choice for teaching Holocaust. We might ask, however, why we want to teach Holocaust to 8th graders in Tennessee in the first place. Jack Klieger, president of and CEO of the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York City, wrote, "The Holocaust is fact, and the facts of the Holocaust are indeed painfully difficult to digest, but Maus has helped countless teachers and students to do just that. We encourage teaching children about the Holocaust to arm them against the misinformation and bigoted lies they are increasingly exposed to online. People must know what happened. The way to confront lies is by teaching truths, difficult truths, complex truths." There's another reason that we teach Holocaust. Jack Klieger of New York's Museum of Jewish Heritage again. "The best way to ensure something like the Holocaust can never happen again is to teach our young people its lessons, that we must sympathize and care for one another no matter our differences, and always stand up against the dangers of hate." This is fairly standard fare, but it's not necessarily the lesson we get from Maus, and that is a good thing. Not everyone agrees that this should be the reason that we teach the Holocaust. I don't exactly disagree with it, but I am sometimes uncomfortable with this reason. It makes me feel like people can justify the death of Jews because their death is a moral lesson for everyone else. Dara Horn, author of the recent book People Love Dead Jews, puts it this way in an interview with the Israeli newspaper Haaretz. "How degrading it is to yourself to make that argument, the whole first they came for the Jews idea. You're forced to erase and denigrate yourself in order to gain some kind of public empathy, because then what you're saying is, we should all care when Jews are murdered and maimed because, it might be an ominous sign that real people might later get attacked." It's a shocking comment, challenging something we might take for granted, but think about it. Do we really want the Holocaust to be a moral lesson for the world? They didn't die in vain. They died to teach us not to commit genocide. They died to teach us to love one another. Really? Holocaust must be taught, as painful as it is, but it should not be the only thing people learn about Jews. There is so much more to know about Jews and Judaism. Art Spiegelman, the author of Maus, told the New York Times that it seemed to him that McMinn County School Board members were asking, why can't they teach a nicer Holocaust? The Holocaust was not nice. It was not light. Maus should be taught because it's an excellent book, because it's a terrific way to teach about the Holocaust, because the graphic novel medium turns out to be a particularly effective way to teach about the Holocaust, because it makes the reader confront a whole host of difficult issues, because the book can be a life changer. It should be taught to Gentiles, and it should be taught to Jews. We should also teach about the Judaism that was lost in the Holocaust, about what Jewish lives were like. We should teach about Jews who were not murdered. We should teach about Judaism to Gentiles. We should teach Judaism to Jews. I'll say that again. We should teach about Judaism to Gentiles. We should teach Judaism to Jews. We should teach and we should learn Torah. And everyone should read Maus. Amen.